Well, hello, friends. This is Teresa Lusk with the Teresa Lusk Show, and I have a powerful, powerful show for you today because I have with me actually one of our ministers. I'm so very proud to call her a daughter, really, of our church and a powerful minister. Most of you know her just as Jenna Quinn from Jenna Quinn's Law, but actually, Jenna is a force. This girl has been used by the Lord to do some powerful things to help those who have been victimized in so many different ways. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss that. And also, we're going to discuss children, keeping them safe. But one of the other topics that's actually one of my topics of choice is dealing with spiritual things that are attacking children. So, Minister Jenna Quinn, welcome to the show, sweetie.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. You know, Jenna, you have spoken all over the nation. You are Jenna Quinn from Jenna's Law. That law is based on your name. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit about your background and why does Jenna's Law exist and what part are you playing in that today?
Yeah, so long story short, very long story, is that it's part of my testimony is that I'm a survivor of child sex crimes. And for many years, understand what it's like to be in bondage, understand what it's like to be victimized, to have fear and intimidation. And it's not a very pretty place to be. It's not a fun place to be. It's a very dark place to be. And so I understand the horrors of despair and shame and fear and guilt and condemnation and all of the horrible things that can really go along with surviving something like this. And so by the grace of God, I was able to tell my sister and get counseling, get help. I was able to receive justice through our criminal justice system as well, and received help at the Children's Advocacy Center. And then, as the Lord would have it, went on to have legislation that bears my name, actually called Jenna's Law. And so, our Texas governor here in Texas, since we're in Texas, former Governor Perry signed Jenna's Law in 2009. And so now we have over half the country that has adopted a form of Jenna's Law. And now federal legislation has been filed called the Jenna Quinn Law as well. And so essentially what that does is it is a requirement for child and youth serving organizations to really, have a basic standard of care for awareness, prevention training, really understanding and equipping mandatory reporters on warning signs a child may display if they've been sexually abused. And then the other part of that is also giving body safety prevention and awareness training to children and youth as well, because we know that our children and youth now are more at risk really than ever before with everything happening. You have, of course, in-person dangers, but now there are so many more dangers online that are just waiting for them in places where they might not expect. And so we want to equip them if they're going to be on devices and teach them what red flag grooming looks like.
Mm-hmm. So is that something that you've seen is actually working now that it's a requirement? Can you do you have some data on that or some testimonies that you've been hearing about that?
Yes, it's been really remarkable to actually see the implementation and how the
Mhm.
success stories have come from that. And so through research, what they've shown is that for educators, after they've had a Jenna's Law training, they were about 4 times more likely to report versus their pre-training careers. And so this is really exciting news because we know that, otherwise reports would not have been made if they hadn't have gone through this training, right? And so I was talking with a district attorney in Tarrant County recently, and he said, you just have no idea. A lot of the cases that we see that come through are because they went through some school program and they made an outcry right then and there because the idea behind this is because there's not a lot of children and youth don't have a safe adult in their life they can tell. There aren't safe places for them. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the only place for that, is the public school system or some form of
Wow.
institution that they're being served at. And so we do know
Yes.
that it is working, and children have to be taught, they have to be
Yeah.
taught body safety and boundary safety. And, it's not any sort of scare tactic. It's an awareness, and it's age
Right.
appropriate, and it's developmentally appropriate. And so it's no different than teaching stop, drop, and roll and
Right.
fire safety and things like that you learn at such an early age, in elementary school. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I guess it depends on where you live in the country, but I do remember like rolling around on the floor as a child.
Yes, I do remember that.
Or going underneath your desk for, a tornado drill, an emergency
Yes.
drill. Or if you live out in California, you probably did that for earthquakes, right? And so
Mhm.
there's a way to do that. Children don't go around starting fires, after they've heard this. And so there's a lot of fears that can come along with, well, of course, what are you teaching my child and this and that. But we make
Right.
a clear distinction that it is prevention, and it has nothing to do with sex education. It's body safety and its boundaries. So that there
Yeah.
are two very different things, and a lot of the time,
Sure.
people confuse the two.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because I think that, especially with where our nation has been, the direction that our nation has been going, where you see a lot of indoctrination, really regarding sexuality, things of that nature. So I'm glad that you made that distinction because it is important to see that this education is necessary. I speak publicly at times about having experienced some things myself, and I think that it gives people the permission to say, also that the kiddos, when you teach them this, it gives them the permission to say, oh my gosh, this was not my fault. This is not something I brought on to myself. This actually is wrong, right? And so I think that it's great that you made that distinction. Do you get any resistance? Obviously, some people, maybe wonder, is this what that is? But do you personally encounter any kind of resistance from people who say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Or is this usually something that's welcomed?
It's generally very welcomed, especially when you're talking to a parent that genuinely wants to protect their child, and
Mhm.
generally wants to say, you know what, I would love to have that body safety conversation with my own child,
Yeah.
because ideally in a perfect world, we would have um, good caregivers, those that are responsible for their children and youth, and we would have them be the safe place. Ideally, the home is the safe place, but that's not always the case. So
Mhm.
ideally, we want parents to be able to talk to their own children and youth, and open that door of communication for them, and say,
Mhm.
if something has happened, if something does happen, if you suspect that someone's unsafe, even if it's someone that, mommy knows and loves and trusts, even if it's someone I know, it's okay to say something. I'll
Yeah.
believe you, and it won't be your fault if you say anything. And so
Mhm.
little simple conversations like that, bathing suit area
Mhm.
boundaries, like there's a lot of good ways to speak to children and youth, but a lot of parents just simply don't feel comfortable doing that, or they
Right.
just they avoid it. And so that's why they're like, you know what, this is a good program. I just had someone ask me the other day about a specific program that someone that they had to sign a opt-in, they had to opt in for this lesson for their child, and they're in elementary school, and they're like, well, what is this? Because it's sexual abuse prevention, and all they see is sexual, like the word sex. And it's like, no, it's prevention. They're going to be
Mhm.
teaching body
Mhm.
safety and um,
Right.
red flag grooming. And I said,
Mhm.
in this program, it's a good program. And they were like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll let my child go to that program.
Sure. Which is funny because they will snap at the word, but then when you do like health education, when it's under that whole health education, and things like that, sometimes some of the programs that get that they get, sometimes the education system gets away with certain things that aren't really great. One of the things that you do is you've started a program where people can be a part of this healing community. And it's like healing mentorship for those who have encountered sexual abuse of any type. And this includes men and women, by the way, because I think that a lot of times what we don't understand is that men and women are both victims. It's not just women, it's men. Can you tell us a little bit about that program? And is that something that you're going to be opening up again soon?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked. And then you also added that men are absolutely affected. And so the research is mixed as far as the real true number of prevalence, because some people never disclose, or they wait a lifetime, or they never tell at all. And it's hard to really know that real number. But historically, the research has said it's estimated 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18, and 1 in 6 boys. And
Wow.
so this is certainly something that is happening to girls and boys at an
Mhm.
early age, at a critical age where their minds and their bodies are, and their identity is being developed. And so many times, we're trying to change the fact that disclosures will happen right away, or interrupt that cycle of grooming
Mhm.
with Jenna's Law. But historically, we've seen disclosures are very late. I mean,
Yeah.
average age of disclosures is age 52.
Wow.
And I think part of that is because, my mom's generation and just the generations before them, there was not a lot of awareness about this issue. It simply wasn't spoken of at all. It simply just didn't
Mhm.
exist. There weren't resources, there weren't crisis centers, there weren't advocacy centers like there is now, right? There weren't
Right.
24-hour hotlines where you can call a hotline and text. And so there was not a lot available to previous
Mhm.
generations. And so a lot of adults are just, still dealing with a lot of the emotional trauma and a lot of the pain and the effects of that.
Mhm.
So this program is an emotional and inner healing program where, we talk about a lot of the real things that are not necessarily addressed at child advocacy center or rape crisis centers, and some of the good secular organizations that I have been a recipient of. It's good counseling, but this really addresses the spiritual impact, because God's word actually shows us. And there's a connection in the scriptures where the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon, actually correlates, he directly correlates a perverse tongue with a crushed spirit.
Mhm.
And so there's a direct correlation, there's a direct causation there and he's actually, more than anybody else, talks the most about perversity. And something that is perverse is
Mm.
just the wrong version of what, the Lord originally calls for something to be, what he's established something to be. And so perversity, though, is that direct causation for a crushed spirit. So we talk about a crushed spirit and how, among so many other things that we have awareness on, that crushed spirit and the impact of the crushed spirit often goes
Okay.
unnoticed, and it can happen quietly,
Mm.
it can happen silently, and there's
Yeah.
spiritual blocks there that people have, that they don't realize that they have, and they're not
Mhm.
able to get that breakthrough that they need.
Mhm. Okay. And is this something you post on your website? Is this like if people want to get some help on that? Is it on jennaquinn.com.org?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, they can go to the website, jennaquinn.net, and they can find out information on that, or they can email me through the website, and we'll be starting classes again very soon after the new year.
Good. Wonderful. So there you have it. So I'm on right now with Jenna Quinn, Minister Jenna Quinn, actually. She is, I tell very proudly, a spiritual daughter, of course, of mine, but she has done so much on her own and by her own right, by her own testimony. And she's out there helping the broken. And today we're discussing how to protect and safeguard children. But we're also going to touch on a topic that is actually very close to my heart, and it's witchcraft and the saturation of witchcraft over our children and the realities of that. But right now, we're just really discussing, you know, the healing and the realities of what sexual abuse does. So if you're watching with us today, and if you have any questions, please feel free to post them, because we want to be able to answer any questions that you may have, and we want to address these hard things. Minister Jenna, sometimes it's hard to talk about these things publicly. Even when a lot of times, even when you've healed, you just feel like, okay, there's a proper place for everything. But when you're on a mission to go and help people, you just speak about it wherever. I will say this. You mentioned the numbers for the men, 1 out of 6. I will bet that number is so much higher. I
Yes,
would say honestly, 3 out of 6. I have actually met many men who have been sexually abused.
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I have too, and, obviously with the differences in gender, it's much more difficult for, men to report and for men to be able to go and get counseling, and, there's just extra layers there for men, when they've been abused by another man, but yes, it is extremely common, unfortunately, but I am grateful for, the resources available for men as well, and for other male
Yes.
survivors that really are, outspoken about what they've been through. And we
Yeah.
recently, actually, this is a little bit off topic, but I don't know if anybody watching saw the Mike Tyson fight recently, but Mike Tyson is a survivor of
Oh, wow.
abuse,
Wow.
and I was
Wow.
watching an interview with him, and it's actually what made him to be the fighter that he is. He
Mm,
made his own resolve as a young child, and he said, "You know what? No one else is ever gonna harm me again, and I'm gonna be
mm.
the toughest fighter the world has ever seen, so that no one
Wow.
harms him." So it was really a defense mechanism, and an
Right.
outlet for that anger and that disappointment and a lot of that
Yeah.
rage, and so, yeah,
Beautiful.
yes, exactly. So, it's very common for males
Mhm.
as well, unfortunately.
And I want to say something to the men that may be watching this. If you have been a victim of sexual abuse at any age, by the way, at any age, we want to encourage you to speak out, get some help, get some trusted people. We know that as women, we understand how hard it is to talk about it. The shame levels that come with it, the embarrassment, the questions, trying to hide it from certain people in your life, et cetera, et cetera. But we're here also to, while we're really, the goal was to talk about this for parents, it really does open up the spectrum for everybody and just says, hey, if you have been hurt, et cetera, please get some help. We want to encourage you and say, you're not alone in this. Reach out and get some help and listen. And even if you get some help and you're like, I didn't like my counselor, it's like, find another one. A lot of times people stop in their healing tracks because they feel like the first place they went was terrible. And sometimes you may do 2 and 3 places until you finally find the right one, but there is hope for you. So Jenna has a powerful story. So please go to jennaquinn. Is it .org?
Uh, .net or .org.
Okay.
Yeah, they forward to each other, so.
Okay. So .net or .org and find out more information. But I want to kind of move on to the next topic. And I know it's like, well, why would you do these 2 topics in one day? Because we
Mhm.
have the attention of parents. And I want to make sure that because we have the attention of parents, we are able to speak into these things. So once again, if you have any questions, comments, I'm going to show a clip of something, Minister Jenna, today. And I can tell you this, the clip is a little intense. And so for those of you who are very like spiritually sensitive, you may say, oh, I don't know, I'm telling you, we prayed before we came on. And, you, this is something that's necessary for people to see. I don't think this show is on any longer. It's a clip of a cartoon that supposedly was made for adults. However, it speaks to the volume of where we are today when it comes to witchcraft and the forwardness of it, the in your face of it, and some dangers. And we're going to have some honest conversations because, as many of you know, I am a pastor and I deal with a lot of spiritual things that a lot of people don't take serious. It's easy to deny something when you've never experienced something. But being in the background that I come from, I've had to deal with a lot of spiritual issues with people. And so I want to show you something that's very real. So I do caution you before you watch, before you tune into this video clip. It is a little intense, but it has a purpose. In addition, it has some just a portion of language, but it's important for you to see what's going on here. So let me get this piece going. Here we go.
Get in! Your dad is the devil and you're the Antichrist.
I'm supposed to accept that you had sex with Satan or anyone?
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Come to your father, Damien.
Oh, you're a girl.
The future is female.
Where have you been?
The metaphysical realm.
When we dated, were you inside someone's corpse?
You had an unfinished dolphin tattoo. Don't be a snob.
She says I lied to protect you.
She sounds like a bitch.
That's what I said.
Hey, look at me. I'm bad grandma.
What do you make of this thing? Biblical or the media? You keep doing what your dad's doing, that evil will spread in you, and you'll be a soulless shell of a human and become, honestly, like a successful CEO in all likelihood.
Get in!
Sorry about that. That little clip is loaded with reality. I don't know if you even captured the is this biblical or is it media part. Tell me your thoughts on that, Minister Jenna.
They're not really hiding behind any agenda. I don't believe it's very clear, obviously they have read the Bible to some degree, about Antichrist, and they have some knowledge, right? And that was interesting. You start throwing that word out there, you're going to grab the attention of all kinds of different denominations and all kinds of people that have read the book of Revelation. So I think it's very interesting that, they would be so in your face about, and then the name Damien, right? So there are a lot of analogies, and they're not even hinting at what
Right.
what the agenda is. This is clearly demonic. There's this total demonic agenda here behind this, and it's a cartoon. So,
Yes.
the thing about cartoons, if you talk to anybody that's in, animation or film, what they'll say about cartoons is that it's a great way to get any real harsh message across, right? If you want to serious propaganda, do it through a cartoon, because you're watching some animation and your filters sort of go down a little bit more when you're watching something that's a cartoon versus a real person on film.
Yeah.
And so that was no mistake either. And really, honestly, it's a form of demonic grooming, whether you have a young teen that's watching this, or an adult, or even young children. Children have iPads by age 4, and they're watching, they're exposed to the internet at such an early age. And so if you have anybody, young people are going to be attracted to cartoons, and it's a form of grooming, to be able to desensitize someone to an idea and to break down any resistance or barriers towards introducing a certain idea or a certain topic. And it does feel like it's demonic grooming.
Yes, that's exactly it. And, one of the things that I have learned with people is that they minimize this so much, and they almost become irritated by the idea of people covering this topic, because people will say, but it's so innocent. It's just a cartoon. It's just this, it's just that, again, in the work of as a pastor and a leader of our own church, we really deal with a lot of people who have these types of spiritual encounters, because there is stuff like this that's been permitted in the home, because items have been permitted. Listen, there's even like a Barbie version of the Ouija board out there. People are using crystals today and incense. And by the way, this is nothing new. It's been used forever. It's just that it's now becoming such a great thing, a popular thing, a trend, even within teenagers. And I was talking with somebody yesterday and talking to them about how this is really pulling the hearts of young girls, meaning, even early 20s, et cetera. Like, this is becoming a thing. And there are repercussions to this, because it's starting to saturate, and then we become desensitized. And I think what's happening in our nation is that we've become desensitized.
Yes. Yes. I think that's the perfect word to use for that. I mean, if you introduce an idea enough and you say that it's good and that it's right and that it's okay, or that it's even healthy or helpful and permissible, then you do it once, twice, a few times, and you are breaking down, any reservation or any barriers or any resistance towards that idea. And so that's exactly, what I see happening specifically with witchcraft and different forms of witchcraft. There's all sorts of different forms of witchcraft.
Yes.
And so, that's really infiltrated. There's articles you can go online and you can Google the rise of witchcraft in the USA.
Mm.
And you will find article after article after article after article, because it is something that I ended up researching on my own just a couple years ago, because I do have a young one. I do have a little girl. I have a toddler, and I started noticing things that were very subtle and that were forms of grooming for demonic agendas and witchcraft ideologies. And so it was very interesting to me. I Googled it, and sure enough, there's actually a lot of prominent, news outlets and press releases from like USA Today, and you've got best-selling novels out there. One of them is called Witchery, on how to channel the witch within you. And I mean, these are best-selling books. And
Yes.
that's for maybe the young audiences, but I'm talking, I Googled this because I have, at this time, my daughter was 2 years ago. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? I don't remember this much exposure myself. And I'm right. There's just infiltration, almost a barrage of witchcraft, and it's in different forms and subtle forms, in cartoons and in crystals and in all of the seemingly
jewelry.
It appears to be that it is good, right? It's the appearance of good.
Right.
And I know you taught on that recently, and it appears to be good. It appears to be innocent. It appears that there's no darkness, no malevolence behind it. But I know better than that. And I know better than that for my family and for my daughter.
Absolutely. And that's the caution, because one of the things that's happened here, if we're honest, is that a funny thing, I was watching CNN this morning. Imagine that. I'm watching CNN, right? But I like to watch the liberal media because I like to really get some good information. If I watch my conservative stuff, which I do, but they all agree with me, and I want to see how I can just take down some of these arguments. So you got to watch the liberal media. And they were talking about the Constitution, and they're also talking about how the Bible is now being brought into schools, and God haters are flipping their lid, like their heads are twisting like devils, really, because they do not like the idea of there being any kind of biblically sound or any kind of biblical teaching of any sort, even if they approach it through a historical lens, which that's the argument, nobody should have to, put up with your religion, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't also mean absence of religion. And I was looking at this and thinking, this is how intense, and this isn't something that's new to us, Minister Jenna, like we understand that. But when you watch it from a news media and you watch a host literally just about spitting out green because they're so livid that that any kind of biblical influence is in there. And then we wonder, where does this come from? Like, what it comes from pulling out the foundation of what makes our nation as a people. You don't even have to say America, because a nation is any group of people, right? But when you have a biblical foundation and basis, like you said, the video was talking about, like you bring up the book of Revelation, but there's a lot of things in that video clip that I showed that actually you understand it because it's in the Bible. So if we want to go and do away with the Bible completely, well, more power to you. However, there's a reason why these portions are being used in videos and cartoons such as these. But yet, the people who are anti-God are really trying to push this stuff away. And so it's interesting how they deny the truth of it, but yet they're playing it right before your eyes, and they're trying to get to your children's hearts. And we're trying to promote it so much and making it so normal that even parents, and can I just be honest, I really believe that a lot of what's going on today is because the parents aren't being gatekeepers. The Bible makes it very clear to multiply, meaning you have some children, but also to raise up godly children. And that means that we take the Bible for what it says, and we teach our children accordingly. A lot of people, I'm going to bring this up. This is, we're on the Teresa Lusk show, not the church show, but this is something real. Some of y'all have children who are having nightmares, and you just think it's if it's a time from time to time thing, maybe. But when you have a child who has recurring nightmares, I would ask, what are you letting them watch?
Yeah.
What's in your home? Like, what kind of things are in your home? What kind of influence is penetrating your very own atmosphere? And so with that being said, Mr. Jenna, are you cautious about what you bring in your home? And is this something that you're, pretty aware of yourself?
Yes, and I am extremely cautious, especially now, even more so. I think things changed a lot for me when I did become a mom, because I realized, I'm responsible and I'm accountable to what I allow her to watch and see. And, their little spirits and their little souls and their minds, they're so precious. They're so vulnerable. And, children are so trustworthy. And they are like sponges, and they do believe the things that they are told, right? I mean, they have childlike faith. And that's why Jesus pointed to a child when he wants to show the disciples what is the example of perfect faith. He points to childlike faith, right? Because children believe, they run to their caregiver. If they're hurt, they ask questions. My daughter's in the age where she's asking questions right now about everything. Like, what's this? What's that? And it's because she believes whatever I tell her, she's going to believe, right? She just wants to respond. And so that is so precious to God. And when you introduce things that are not of God, right, then I'm accountable to that. And so for me, I've noticed there's a brand new show, and I'm going to go somewhere, and this may offend people, but I'm very sorry. Sometimes the truth is hurtful because it pierces the level of denial. It pierces the denial. And that's why truth is freeing, is because, it pierces deception, and deception, leads to bondage. Well, I grew up, watching a lot of Disney shows, and there's some decent shows on Disney that I believe are okay, but there's a new Ariel show out there on Disney Junior. So this is not for teenagers. This is Disney Junior. This is for toddlers. Okay. And it's the new Ariel show. Well, the premise behind this new show is that Ursula, the witch, the sea witch, they've made peace with Ursula now, and Ursula teaches them how to be a witch like her. And so I've taught my daughter, we have power through God. God has all power and all authority, and he's given us that power and that authority. And so I'm teaching her about God's power primarily, right? And then she sees this show, and it's a commercial. This isn't even the full show. I won't allow her to watch, but it's just a commercial, right? Trying to hook children and youth. And this commercial is literally, you see Ariel and all of her little friends. They're all in a line. They're all lined up, and each of them has a cauldron pot in front of them. And the cauldron pot has green smoke coming out, like lime green smoke. And she's teaching them how to be a witch and how to do spells and things like that. And my daughter, she called me and she said, Mommy, she said, they're doing magic. And I said, what? I flew into the room and I was like, what? You walk away for 1 minute, and it's like, what's on TV these days? You walk away for 1 minute to try to go, do something. And unfortunately, she was right. I just had this anger rise up in me because not everyone understands. Not everyone sees the road to deception. Then that can lead people down, right?
Yes. And I think that's it, because it seems so petty to be like, oh my gosh, it's a show, it's a kid's show. But when you come from the background that we come from, and you've seen what you see, you understand it's not just a show. It really isn't. It opens up your curiosity, your senses to the spiritual realm, which is why little kids, because little kids are extremely sensitive in the spirit. They're very sensitive. You said something earlier that really stayed with me for a moment. And you said, kids, they believe everything you tell them. And I thought to myself, that's because God made them that way, so that godly parents can deposit godliness into them while they're building up their who they are, so that they can become healthy, whole, godly human beings, right? And so, and this is part of it. So when they're little, that's why they're so very sensitive. They're spiritually sensitive as well, which is why they would encounter a lot of nightmares. How do they know? Let me just put this out there. How would a child know to have nightmares by watching a video? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a correlation there that we may want to dismiss, but explain the nightmares. Why are kids scared? It's like I was talking about Halloween not too long ago. How does a little child know when you take your kids trick-or-treating? How do they know? And this offends everybody. People get so offended about Halloween because they protect Halloween with all their soul and their might and their strength. But I'm trying to make a point here. I'm not trying to argue. I'm trying to make a point. How do your kids know to be scared of the scary visuals and the scary pictures? Nobody told them. Who taught them that? Except their spirit is already equipped by God to not feel like that is normal and natural.
Yes, exactly. No, that's exactly right. Their spirits are so porous, and they know the truth, right? Because God's spirit is with them. And so they do know the truth, and they are sensitive to the spiritual world. I think more sensitive than a lot of adults, right? And so they do understand. They understand fear. They understand joy. They understand these things so much more, I feel, than adults do.
Absolutely. And so really what we're doing as we're getting close to wrapping up this segment is really just bringing some awareness to things that children are at risk of. They're at risk of being groomed sexually. So therefore, people like Minister Jenna are out there doing their job, equipping, training, teaching, even offering resources. And then we want to cover the reality of these things that a lot of Americans, and by the way, can I just be honest? I would dare say Christian Americans, because they're probably more guilty than anybody, because they love to just make, exceptions to everything, right? And going along with culture instead of going, okay, if I call myself a Christian, that means I have a rule book that I should go by. It's called the Bible. And then make my decisions from there. The Bible makes it very clear. Don't even, be around something that even has the appearance of evil. Not even the appearance, right? So if we believe that the Bible is God's rule book and guidebook for us as parents, as individuals, etc., then we would pay more attention to that. So we really want to encourage parents, pay attention when somebody says, and is being, whether a show is being accused of being demonic, a product is being accused of being demonic, don't second guess it. Listen, we have this, I guess I should say this, kind of news. There's a surge of different people groups coming in, which means different belief systems. And often those belief systems are saturated into whatever nation they go into, whether it's America, Mexico, wherever, pick your choice. But the truth is that a lot of that stuff is also founded on stuff that's dark. And you know how you're seeing it today? Jewelry, clothing. And guess what? They're all over stores like Target, and moms are like, get that, I'll purchase that for you, honey. And here we are promoting witchcraft, not knowing that we're even doing that.
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Because it's not about, pointing the finger and blaming and saying, this is not Scarlet Letter. We're not saying, oh, this is a witch, or that's demonic.
Right.
But as a whole, 100%, America has become much more spiritual than it ever has been before. But the question is, has it become spiritual about? So in what way and in what form has it become more spiritual, right? And just from the different spiritual influences that just exist from all over the world. And there's all sorts of different spiritual practices. And so in what way has it become, more spiritual? And so I think that's that's always been the question for me, and that's always something that
Mhm.
I've been teaching my daughter at a young age. The same way I safeguard her on body safety and boundaries. I safeguard her in the spirit as the best I can, and I'm still learning,
Right.
of course. But I teach
Mhm.
her the only spirit that we want is the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit.
That's
No
right.
other
Yes.
spirit is welcome, because there's all sorts of different, spiritual practices out there, but Holy
Yeah.
Spirit has ultimate power and ultimate authority. He's
Yeah.
he's the authority over all spirits above heaven, below heaven,
Yeah.
on the earth, below the earth, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm teaching her, focusing on
That's
that.
right. That's right. I think that's great. I think you do have to start from a young age. I'm very particular. I taught my kids very strictly. They're of age now, adults, and sometimes there's a lot of people maybe who are watching and they say, "Well, my kids, I taught them and they're still doing." There's nothing. You can pray and continue to encourage, but the goal is to really try to teach your children the way of the Lord, and when they're grown, they're not going to depart from it. The Bible says, that when they are of age, but really what that means is when they are mature. In other words, when they've tested the waters and have understood this is not of God, so I'm gonna go the right way. But it is our job to safeguard. So parents, we encourage you, be very aware, ask questions, talk to your children. If you don't know how to talk to your children about either one of these topics, excuse me, it's okay to research. It's okay. Just get some healthy, wholesome, uh, guidance. Sometimes we find just the most random stuff online and we just go by that. We go by the culture. We go by, the direction that everybody else is going. That may not necessarily be the best thing. So we want to encourage you to be aware, pay attention, read, be on top of things, have normal conversations. It doesn't have to be weird. We don't have to gather a church meeting, in the living room. It could literally be like, hey, let's go get some ice cream. Let's talk about stuff. And then it doesn't even have to be a 20-minute sermon. You know what I mean? Just talk to your kids, make them aware, and go from there. Any last minute thoughts, Minister Jenna, that as we close on any of these two topics?
I think that, I think we've covered a lot here. And, these are really the two things that we're talking about are not necessarily popular topics. They're not necessarily
Right.
fun for a lot of people, but that's been part of the problem through so many years, is that there haven't been conversations about this. And so when you're bold and you're assertive and you're on the offense, then you have a better chance of leading your own life and leading your own family. And so I hope that people have learned today. I've been in dark places, I've seen dark things, and I know that God's spirit is above all other spirits. And so it's really not a paranoia for me at all.
Right.
It's just more about standing on truth and standing firm in the knowledge that I do know and that I do have.
That's
And hoping that others come into that understanding and that knowledge so that they can walk in power and authority as well.
That's right. That's right. And that's all we can do is deliver the information and the rest is up to you. But we tell you from experience, not just because we're just like, hey, let's just talk about this because we need a show to produce today. These are things that if you know the truth, it is your responsibility to spread it. And when you hear the truth, it's your responsibility to accept it. So we just leave you with that. And Minister Jenna, where can they reach you at? How should they find you?
Absolutely. Online website, jennaquinn.net, or through different social media outlets, Jenna Quinn Love on Instagram, or Jenna Quinn, Jenna's Law on Facebook as well. Feel free to reach out, for any questions. And thank you again, Pastor Teresa, for addressing these important things.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And I'm so glad that you were willing to share so openly. I think people like you need to continue to be the voice, regardless if whether people like it or not. It's a perfect season to stand up and speak for those who don't have someone to speak for them. So thank you, Mr. Jenna. Blessings on all that you're doing. Keep up the powerful work. And for those of you who are tuned in, don't forget to go and follow her. Don't forget to go to her social media pages, but also to her website so that you can see what all she's done, what she's got going on. And as far as the Teresa Lusk Show, don't forget to share this and follow.